A 9-year-old kid invites his bully to a chili cook-off, feeds him a bowl of his own dead parents, then licks the tears off his face while Radiohead watches. That scene aired on Comedy Central, on a show about 4 elementary school kids in Colorado. And somehow, that is not even close to the darkest thing South Park has ever done. 30 items, 7 levels, from episodes that made your parents uncomfortable to things the creators buried and prayed nobody would ever dig up. We're going from cartoon profanity all the way down to real death threats, government bans, genuine human tragedy, and the kind of behind-the-scenes secrets that make you wonder how this show has survived for almost 3 decades. This is the most disturbing South Park iceberg. Quick disclaimer before we start. Some of the stuff we're covering today gets seriously dark. Not just, oh, that cartoon was edgy, dark, but actually disturbing when you pull back the curtain and look at what was happening behind the scenes while these episodes were being made. We'll start at the surface with things that even casual fans probably remember, but the deeper we go, the more twisted and uncomfortable it gets. You've been warned. Let's start at the tip of the iceberg, level 1, the surface. Now, South Park has been on the air since August 13th, 1997. That's 28 seasons, 338 episodes, and a seemingly endless appetite for making people uncomfortable. The show was the first weekly program in television history to receive a TVMA rating, which they basically treated as a dare from day one. But there are a handful of episodes and moments that even people who have never watched a full episode of South Park have probably heard about. They've become part of pop culture mythology at this point, and they sit right here at the top of the iceberg because while they're dark, they're also the ones the show is proudest of. Let's start with the big one. Scott Tenorman Must Die, Season 5, Episode 4. If you ask any South Park fan what the single darkest moment in the show's history is, 9 out of 10 will point to this episode, and for good reason. It is the episode that turned Eric Cartman from a bratty, annoying kid into something genuinely terrifying. So here's what happens. Cartman, being Cartman, buys pubic hair from a 9th grader named Scott Tenorman for $10 because he thinks that's how puberty works. When Stan and Kyle explain to him that you actually grow your own, Cartman tries to get his money back. But Scott is smarter than him. Every scheme Cartman cooks up backfires. Scott humiliates him over and over. He tricks Cartman into traveling all the way to Fort Collins for a fake pube fair. He makes Cartman dance like a pig in front of everyone. And then, in the final insult, Scott burns Cartman's money right in front of his face while Cartman screams. And that's when something in Cartman snaps. Now, up until this point in the series, Cartman has been selfish, racist, manipulative, and cruel. But always in a kind of childish, impotent way. He schemes and fails, he rages, and nothing happens. This episode changes that permanently. Cartman devises a plan so elaborate that it would make a Bond villain feel inadequate. He invites Scott to a chili cook-off, but in the background he's been setting up a chain of events that nobody sees coming. Cartman knows that Stan and Kyle will betray him, and warns Scott about his plan to train a pony to attack Scott. He's counting on that betrayal, because he also knows that Scott won't go to the ranch himself out of fear, so Scott will send his parents instead. And Cartman has already tipped off the ranch owner, Farmer Denkins, that violent trespassers are in the area. When Scott's parents show up on Denkins' property, Denkins shoots and kills them both. Cartman arrives at the scene just in time to steal the bodies. He spends the entire night with a hacksaw, and the next day, at the chili cook-off, he feeds Scott a bowl of chili. When Scott finishes eating, Cartman tells him exactly what he's done. He tells Scott that his parents are dead. He tells Scott that he cut them up. And he tells Scott that he just ate them. Scott reaches into the bowl and pulls out his mother's finger with the diamond ring still on it. He vomits. He starts sobbing. And Cartman jumps up on the table and sings, "Nya nya 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 nya, I made you eat your parents." But Cartman is not done. Because right on cue, exactly on Cartman's schedule, Scott's favorite band, Radiohead, walks around the corner. They see Scott crying and call him a crybaby. They tell him he's totally not cool, and they leave. Then Cartman licks the tears off Scott's face. He calls them the tears of unfathomable sadness and says they taste sweet. Kyle turns to Stan and says it's probably best for everybody to never make Cartman angry again. Stan immediately agrees. This episode holds a 9.6 out of 10 on IMDb, making it the highest rated South Park episode of all time. And if you think the story ends there, it doesn't. Years later, in the two-part episodes 200 and 201, the show reveals that Jack Tennerman, Scott's father, was actually Cartman's biological father, which means Cartman unknowingly arranged the murder of his own dad and fed him to his own half-brother. Kyle was right. Don't ever make Cartman angry. Next up, and staying in Season 5 since apparently that's where South Park decided to go full dark mode, it hits the fan. Season 5, Episode 1. On June 20th, 2001, South Park aired an episode that said the word shit completely uncensored 162 times. They put a counter on screen. Every single time the word was spoken, the counter ticked up. By the end of the episode, viewers had heard it so many times that it stopped sounding like a word. Now, why did they do this? Because a few weeks earlier, an episode of NYPD Blue had used the same word once, uncensored, and it became a national scandal. There were congressional hearings about it, parent groups lost their minds. The entire country was debating whether a single word on a television show was the beginning of the end of American decency. Parker and Stone watched this unfold, and their response was basically, oh, one was a big deal? Let's see what happens when we do it 162 times. The episode actually has a plot, something about the word being an ancient curse that unleashes a plague. But nobody remembers the plot. Everyone remembers the counter. And here's the thing, South Park was already the first weekly show to ever receive a TVMA rating when it premiered in 1997. Apparently they took that as a starting line, not a finish line. Now we're moving to Christmas, because nothing says holiday cheer like satanic woodland animals performing a blood orgy. Woodland Critter Christmas, Season 8, Episode 14. This episode opens like a children's storybook. The narration is in rhyming couplets, the animation style is soft and warm, and a group of adorable talking woodland animals are building a Christmas tree in the forest. They find Stan and ask for his help making a star for the top. It's charming, it's sweet. It feels like something you could show a 5-year-old. Then the animals explain that one of them, a porcupine named Porcupiney, is pregnant with their savior. A mountain lion keeps killing the savior each year before it can be born. They need Stan to kill the mountain lion so the birth can happen. Stan reluctantly agrees and kills the mountain lion, only to discover it was a mother with 3 orphaned cubs. He feels awful about it, but hey, at least the woodland critters can celebrate their savior's birth now, right? Wrong. The woodland critters are Satanists. Their savior is the Antichrist. And the moment Stan leaves, they sacrifice Rabbity the rabbit, devour his entrails while chanting in praise of the Dark Lord, and then immediately have what the show describes as a blood orgy. Cute little animated squirrels and bears and deer covered in blood, engaging in acts that absolutely cannot be described in this video. It gets worse. The critters need a human host for the Antichrist. The host has to be a non-baptized, non-Christian person. They find Kyle Broflovsky, who's Jewish, and kidnap him for the ritual. In the end, Santa Claus shows up, pulls out a combat shotgun, and blows every single one of the critters apart. He's about to kill the Antichrist too, when Kyle says he actually wants the demon inside him so he can make the world better for Jewish people. The Antichrist enters Kyle and he's about to destroy the world when the camera cuts to Mr. Garrison's classroom. The entire episode was a story that Cartman was reading aloud for a school assignment. The whole thing, every bit of it. The satanic animals, the blood orgy, the Antichrist, Kyle being the vessel of evil. All of it was Cartman's creative writing project. This aired as a primetime Christmas special on cable television during the holiday season. Merry Christmas. The last entry for level 1 is something that starts as a joke and ends as existential horror if you think about it for more than 30 seconds. Kenny's deaths aren't just a running gag. They're canon, everybody knows the bit. Kenny dies in almost every episode of the early seasons. Stan says, "Oh my God, they killed Kenny." Kyle says, "You bastards." And then the next episode, Kenny's back like nothing happened. For years, it was treated purely as a comedic device, a reset button, a recurring joke. But then season 14 happened and the Coon trilogy decided to actually explain what was going on. It turns out Kenny's parents attended meetings of a Cthulhu cult before he was born. His mother was granted a dark gift, or maybe a dark curse, depending on how you look at it. Every time Kenny dies, he is reborn. He wakes up in his bed the next morning, and nobody around him remembers that he died. Not his parents, not Stan, not Kyle, not Cartman, nobody. But Kenny remembers, every single time. In one episode, he screams at his friends that he has died countless times and nobody ever cares. He is fully aware that he's trapped in an infinite cycle of violent death and rebirth. And the isolation of that knowledge is something the show mostly plays for laughs, but occasionally lets the horror of it peek through. Think about that. A child who has been burned alive, crushed, eaten, impaled, shot, exploded, and killed in hundreds of other ways. And who remembers every single death, and who has to wake up every morning knowing that if he mentions it to anyone, they won't have any idea what he's talking about. That's not a running gag. That's a nightmare that never ends, and that's just level 1. The stuff that sits right at the surface, the episodes and moments that even casual fans have heard about. From here, things start getting darker. Level 2, below the surface. This is where we get into the episodes that fans actively debate. The ones where people disagree about whether South Park went too far, where the comedy starts to feel a lot more uncomfortable than funny, and where the show proved that there was basically no line it wasn't willing to cross. The China Probrum, Season 12, Episode 7. Now the title of this one is already doing a lot of heavy lifting, but the A-plot isn't actually what makes this episode infamous. The A-plot is Cartman being paranoid about a Chinese invasion in the lead up to the 2008 Beijing Olympics and dragging Butters into a scheme to take over a P.F. Chang's restaurant. That part is offensive in its own way, but it's standard South Park. The B-plot is what put this episode on the map. Stan, Kyle, and the other boys are emotionally devastated by Indiana Jones in the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull. Not just disappointed, devastated, and the way South Park chose to express their disappointment was to depict Steven Spielberg and George Lucas violently assaulting Indiana Jones, on screen, repeatedly. The scenes directly recreate assault sequences from Deliverance, The Accused, and Boys Don't Cry. They're graphic, they're prolonged, and they happen multiple times throughout the episode, each instance more disturbing than the last. The metaphor is clear. Parker and Stone felt that the fourth Indiana Jones movie violated something they loved, and they expressed that feeling in the most visceral, uncomfortable way they possibly could. Even by South Park standards, these scenes shocked people, and Parker and Stone have actually acknowledged that this episode was one of their darkest. When you make the creators of South Park admit they might have pushed too far, you know you've hit a different level. Next, we have an episode that hit very different when it aired in 2008, and hits even harder now knowing everything that's come to light since. Britney's New Look, Season 12, Episode 2. This aired just 2 months after Britney Spears' heavily publicized breakdown, which means the wounds were about as fresh as they could possibly be when this episode landed on television. In the episode, Britney Spears arrives in South Park after being hounded relentlessly by paparazzi. The pressure has broken her completely. She goes into a bathroom with a shotgun and attempts to take her own life. She survives, but she's lost the top half of her head. Everything above the jaw is gone. And here's the disturbing part. Nobody cares, not about her well-being anyway. The town, the media, and the entertainment industry all continue to exploit her. They dress up what's left of her and prop her on stage to perform. They photograph her, they mock her. She becomes a spectacle that the entire country feeds on. Then the episode reveals what's actually happening. Brittany is a sacrifice. The townspeople and media are deliberately driving her to her death as a part of a ritualistic harvest sacrifice, the same way ancient civilizations would select a person, build them up, worship them, and then destroy them for the benefit of the community. It's not cruelty for cruelty's sake, it's a system. It's organized. And it's been going on forever. When Brittany finally dies, the town simply selects a new target. The final shot shows the crowd slowly turning to look at a young Miley Cyrus. Given everything we've learned about the Britney Spears conservatorship and the entire Free Britney movement since this episode aired, the satire doesn't feel like satire anymore. It feels like Parker and Stone saw exactly what was happening to her in real time and put it on screen when nobody else was willing to say it out loud. The episode is almost unwatchable now because of how accurate it turned out to be. Moving on to what might be the cruelest ending South Park has ever written, and that includes the Scott Tenorman chili, Stanley's Cup, Season 10, Episode 14, the season finale. This episode follows every single sports movie trope with surgical precision. Stan is required to coach a pee-wee hockey team of tiny children as a community service requirement. One of the kids, a boy named Nelson, is battling cancer. The implication throughout the episode is clear: if the team wins, Nelson gets better. It's the classic underdog setup: a ragtag team of misfits, an inspiring coach, a sick child whose fate hangs in the balance. You've seen this movie 100 times, and it always ends the same way. The team pulls together, wins the big game, and the sick kid recovers. South Park knows you're expecting that ending. The Pee-wee team makes it to the championship, and their opponent is the Detroit Red Wings, not another kids team, not a team of slightly older children, the actual Detroit Red Wings, professional adult hockey players, full-grown men on ice skates. The Red Wings body check toddlers into the boards. They slap shot pucks at 5-year-olds. The children are brutalized on the ice in a sequence that is played completely straight, with no jokes, no winking at the camera, and no relief. The Pee-wee team loses. Nelson dies. Stan stares in horror. The episode ends. No punchline, no lesson, no reset. Just a dead child and a stunned audience. A lot of South Park episodes use cruelty as a setup for comedy. This one uses the promise of comedy as a setup for cruelty. And the fact that it was a season finale, the last thing viewers would see before months of waiting for new episodes, makes it feel almost vindictive. Parker and Stone wanted their audience to sit with that feeling over the summer. No resolution until next season, just a dead kid and an empty arena. Now we need to talk about Butters, because Leopold Butters Stotch might be the most consistently abused character in the history of American animation, and the show is fully aware of this. Butters is designed to be the sweetest, most innocent kid in South Park. He's trusting, he's kind, he's earnest, and he wants desperately to be liked, which is precisely why the universe of South Park destroys him at every possible opportunity. His entire life, when you lay it out episode by episode, reads like a case file from Child Protective Services. His father, Stephen Stotch, is caught frequenting an adult movie theater and a bathhouse. When this is discovered, Butters' mother, Linda, has a complete mental breakdown. Rather than face the shame and the public fallout, she puts Butters in the car, drives to a bridge, and tries to drown him in the river. She pushes her own son into the water to die. Butters survives, and the show moves on. His grandmother physically bullies him at school. She threatens him, hits him, and psychologically torments him in a plotline that directly parallels real-world elder-on-child abuse, the kind that goes unreported because nobody believes a grandmother could be violent. Butters is afraid to tell anyone because he knows they won't take it seriously, and he's right. Nobody does. His parents ground him for everything: missing a piece of mail, a bad dream, being in the wrong place when Cartman does something terrible. He is held responsible for events he had no part in and punished for things that aren't crimes. In one episode, he's locked in a bomb shelter and told the world has ended, left alone in the dark for days. Cartman manipulates him constantly. He convinces Butters he's invisible. He uses Butters as bait. He pretends to be a girl online to humiliate Butters. In one episode, Cartman literally has Butters committed to a mental institution. And here's the thing that makes this entry genuinely disturbing rather than just darkly funny. If you watch any one of these episodes in isolation, it's a comedy episode. Butters gets hurt, the audience laughs, and we move on. But if you watch all of them together, if you lay out Butters' life across 28 seasons, what you're looking at is a comprehensive, detailed, unflinching portrait of child abuse, drowning attempts, physical violence, psychological manipulation, isolation, gaslighting, and a support system that fails him at every turn, all played for laughs, all aired on television, all happening to the nicest character in the show. That's intentional. Parker and Stone know exactly what they're doing with Butters. They've said as much in interviews. He exists to be the show's punching bag because his innocence makes the cruelty funnier. But the cumulative effect when you actually sit down and catalog what this child has endured across nearly 3 decades of television is something that stops being funny and starts being genuinely uncomfortable. Butters isn't a comedy character. He's a tragedy wearing a comedy costume. And before we go deeper, let's talk about something most viewers walk right past without noticing: the hidden aliens. Starting from the very first episode of South Park, the animation team has been hiding gray aliens in the background of almost every episode. They're called visitors, and they've been there since 1997, in windows, in crowds, in reflections, hidden in trees, on walls, inside picture frames, behind characters, and occasionally disguised as everyday objects. This has been going on for 28 seasons. Fans have cataloged hundreds of sightings. In some episodes, the alien appears as a character's reflection in a mirror. In others, it's hidden on a poster or carved into a piece of furniture. The animators have never stopped doing this. It's one of the longest-running Easter eggs in the history of animation, spanning nearly 3 decades and over 300 episodes. The first episode of the series literally involves alien abduction. Cartman gets an anal probe from visiting aliens. It's the pilot, the very foundation of the show. And those aliens, they never left. They're in the background of almost everything that follows, watching, observing, hidden in plain sight while the chaos of South Park unfolds around them. Whether this is purely a fun production gag or something with deeper implications is up to you. But the idea that extraterrestrial observers have been embedded in this town since the very beginning, silently watching everything, is a detail that gets creepier the more you think about it. And that wraps up level 2. We've moved past the stuff everyone remembers and into the territory where people start squinting at the screen and asking whether maybe, just maybe, this show has been getting away with more than anyone realized. But we're about to go deeper, because level 3 is where the show stops being about cartoon kids and starts being about the real people who make it. Level 3. The deep. This is the tier where things shift. We're no longer just talking about episodes that pushed boundaries or jokes that went too far. We're talking about the hidden details, the disturbing implications buried in the show's DNA, and the moments where the line between South Park the cartoon and the real world starts to blur in ways that most viewers never even notice. The Return of Chef, Season 10, Episode 1. And this one isn't just a dark episode, it's a genuinely sad piece of television history disguised as an animated comedy. For 9 seasons, Isaac Hayes voiced Chef, the school cafeteria worker who is basically the only competent adult in South Park. Chef was the guy who gave the boys life advice, sang ridiculous songs about making love, and served as a warm, funny, grounding presence in a show that otherwise had no interest in being warm or grounded. Fans love Chef, the boys love Chef, and Isaac Hayes seemed to love playing Chef. Then, in 2005, South Park aired an episode called Trapped in the Closet. It was a direct, savage mockery of Scientology that included an animated breakdown of the religion's core beliefs, complete with a subtitle on screen that read, "This is what Scientologists actually believe." The episode depicted Tom Cruise literally refusing to come out of a closet, while Scientology officials panicked about the PR disaster. It was one of the funniest and most controversial episodes South Park had ever produced. Isaac Hayes was a Scientologist, and shortly after the episode aired, he left the show. A public statement was released in his name saying he could no longer be associated with a show that disrespected religious beliefs. Now here's where it gets complicated. Parker and Stone publicly pointed out that Hayes had never once objected to the show mocking Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Mormonism, Catholicism, Buddhism, or any other religion for 9 straight years. The objection only surfaced when his personal belief system was the target. But there's another layer to this. Hayes had suffered a stroke in early 2006. Some people close to him, including his own son, have suggested that Hayes himself may not have made the decision to leave the show. The implication is that people around him, people connected to Scientology, issued the statement on his behalf while he was in a compromised state of health. That question has never been definitively answered. What was answered was how the show chose to handle his departure. In The Return of Chef, Chef comes back to South Park after spending time with the Super Adventure Club, which the episode describes as a cult of globe-trotting individuals who prey on children. The connection to what Parker and Stone believed about Scientology could not be more obvious. Chef's dialogue in the episode is clearly spliced together from old recordings. His words sound choppy and mismatched because they were literally cut and pasted from lines he'd recorded in previous seasons. The boys try to save Chef from the cult's brainwashing, but they fail. And then the show kills him. Chef is struck by lightning, he catches fire, he falls off a bridge, he is impaled on a sharp rock formation at the bottom of a canyon, and then a mountain lion and a grizzly bear arrive and tear his body apart while the boys watch in horror. His face is literally ripped off on screen. At Chef's funeral, Kyle delivers a eulogy that functions as Parker and Stone's real-world message. He says, "We shouldn't be mad at Chef for leaving us. We should be mad at that fruity little club for scrambling his brains." They were openly, explicitly blaming Scientology for taking their friend away from the show. And then, in a final twist, Chef's mangled body is resurrected as a Darth Vader-like figure, implying the character could return someday. He never did. Isaac Hayes passed away on August 10th, 2008. He was 65 years old. If you watch that funeral scene knowing what happened afterward, knowing that Hayes would die just 2 years later, knowing the questions about whether he even wanted to leave the show in the first place, it stops being a comedy episode. It becomes something much heavier. Kyle's eulogy sounds less like a joke about Scientology and more like a genuine goodbye to a man his creators loved, but felt they'd lost to something they couldn't fight. Moving on to an episode that might be the most genuinely depressing thing South Park has ever produced. And this one doesn't involve any violence, any shock humor, or any outrageous plot twists. It's just sad. You're Getting Old, Season 15, Episode 7. Stan turns 10 years old, and suddenly everything around him starts to look and sound like literal excrement. Not metaphorically, literally. Music sounds like flatulence. Movies look like fecal matter. Food, conversation, entertainment, everything that used to bring him joy now appears to him as actual waste. The other kids think he's being a contrarian, his friends pull away from him, and Stan is stuck in a world where everything he used to love has become unbearable. That would be enough for a decent South Park episode on its own. But then the show does something it almost never does. It gets real. Stan's parents, Randy and Sharon, sit down and admit to each other that they're unhappy, not in a funny way, not in a way that sets up a punchline. They just quietly admit that their marriage isn't working anymore. They decide to get a divorce. Stan moves into a new house with his mom. The episode ends with a montage set to Fleetwood Mac's Landslide, showing Stan sitting alone in his new room, drinking, while his friends and family move on without him. There's no joke at the end. The credits roll in near silence. A lot of fans interpreted this episode as Trey Parker expressing genuine creative exhaustion and personal depression. The cynicism felt too real, too specific, too painful to be purely fictional. And while the following episode, Asperger's, does partially reset the status quo with Stan's parents getting back together, there's a quiet detail that most people missed. In the closing moments of that episode, Stan is shown secretly taking a sip of alcohol before rejoining his friends. The implication is that the only way he can tolerate the world is by drinking. He's 10 years old. The show never directly addresses this again. It just exists. A 10-year-old boy has developed a coping mechanism involving alcohol, and the narrative moves on as though that's fine. And somehow, the fact that it's never brought up again makes it worse. Now for something that genuinely shocked audiences in a way no animated show ever had before. Mr. Garrison's Fancy New Vagina, Season 9, Episode 1, the Season 9 premiere. In this episode, Mr. Garrison undergoes gender-affirming surgery. The show depicts this process, but not through animation. What viewers at home actually saw was real, live-action medical footage of a gender-affirming surgical procedure intercut with the animated story. Actual surgery, real surgical instruments, real tissue, on screen, during a cartoon on Comedy Central. In 2005, nobody tuning into an animated comedy expected to see live-action medical footage. The show gave no advance warning. It just showed it. And the effect was deeply jarring because it violated the fundamental contract between an animated show and its audience. You're watching construction paper characters crack jokes, and then suddenly you're watching a real surgical procedure that is graphic enough to make medical students uneasy. The episode also features Kyle getting a negroplasty to become tall and black so he can play basketball, and his father Gerald getting a dolphinoplasty to become a dolphin. Both of those subplots are handled through animation. Only Garrison's surgery uses real footage. Whether this was meant to add weight to Garrison's storyline or simply to shock the audience has been debated for 2 decades, but the effect was unmistakable. It was one of the only times South Park broke its own fourth wall in a way that felt physically uncomfortable. And while we're in the deep tier, let's talk about a moment that South Park fans rarely discuss, but that remains one of the show's most emotionally devastating sequences: the Death Camp of Tolerance. Season 6, Episode 14. The premise is straightforward enough. Mr. Garrison wants to get fired from his job so he can sue the school for discrimination. To accomplish this, he begins behaving in the most outrageously inappropriate ways possible in front of his students, hoping someone will complain. But instead of firing him, the school administration sends the boys to a tolerance camp because they assume the children are the ones with the problem. The tolerance camp is designed to look exactly like a Nazi concentration camp. The children are forced into hard labor. They're subjected to dehumanizing conditions. The visual parallels to the Holocaust are explicit and intentional, filmed in black and white to evoke Schindler's List. The episode's point is that forced tolerance enforced through authoritarianism, is itself a form of intolerance. And the imagery of children in a death camp setting is something the show commits to fully. There are no wink and nod moments. The kids are suffering. But the detail that pushes this episode deeper into Iceberg territory is the subplot. In order to get fired, Garrison introduces a character named Lemmywinks. Lemmywinks is a gerbil. And his journey through the episode is one that we absolutely cannot describe in this video, but that viewers of the episode will never, ever forget. It is one of the most graphic visual sequences the show has ever produced, and it is presented as an epic fantasy adventure complete with its own original song. The contrast between the heroic music and what is actually being depicted on screen is, to put it mildly, deeply upsetting. This episode aired in 2002. It was the 6th season. The show had been on the air for 5 years and was already known for pushing limits. And somehow, this was the episode where a lot of people felt like they'd seen something they genuinely wish they could unsee. And that closes out level 3, the deep tier, the layer where South Park stops being just a cartoon and starts revealing the darker machinery underneath, the real-world pain behind character departures, the genuine depression hiding inside animated cynicism, the surgical footage nobody asked to see, and the tolerance camp that taught a lesson through imagery most shows wouldn't dare touch. But we're only halfway down this iceberg, and from here on, things are going to get much less funny and much more real. Level 4, the darkness. This is where South Park's history intersects with genuine tragedy. Real deaths, real suffering, and real consequences that nobody anticipated when a couple of guys from Colorado decided to make a cartoon about foul-mouthed children. The entries from this point forward aren't about episodes that went too far. They're about the real world bleeding into the show in ways that changed it permanently. Mary Kay Bergman. If you've watched South Park's first 3 seasons, you've heard her voice hundreds of times. You just didn't know it. Mary Kay Bergman was the primary female voice actress for South Park from the show's debut in 1997 through the 3rd season. And when I say primary, I mean she voiced almost every single woman and girl on the show. Leanne Cartman, Sheila Broflovsky, Sharon Marsh, Wendy Testaberger, Carol McCormick, Shelley Marsh, Principal Victoria, Mayor McDaniels, Ms. Crabtree, Nurse Gollum. If you heard a female voice in the first 3 seasons of South Park, it was almost certainly her. She was also the official voice of Snow White for Disney starting in 1989. She voiced Daphne Blake in the Scooby-Doo franchise. She performed the yodeling vocals for Jessie in Toy Story 2. She was one of the most prolific voice actresses in the industry. And the creative choices she brought to South Park helped shape characters that are still on the show almost 30 years later. It was Bergman who came up with the idea to give Leanne Cartman that 1950s sitcom mom voice. She invented Sheila Broflovsky's what catchphrase. She created Shelley Marsh's lisp. Parker and Stone didn't have those ideas. Bergman walked into the audition and gave them characters that were better than what they had written. On November 11th, 1999, during the production of Season 3, Mary Kay Bergman died by suicide. She was 38 years old. She had suffered from generalized anxiety disorder and bipolar disorder for years. But she had hidden her conditions from almost everyone in her life, including her family and close friends. Her husband, Dino Andrade, later said that she was haunted by demons, irrational fears, and unfathomable pain. Nobody around her knew the extent of what she was going through. In public and at work, she appeared to be thriving. She had just received an Annie Award nomination for her work on the South Park movie. Blame Canada had been nominated for an Oscar. By every external measure, she was at the peak of her career. After her death, Parker and Stone were devastated. They felt it would be in poor taste to audition new voice talent mid-season while they were still grieving their friend. So they made a decision. For the remainder of Season 3, they would drastically reduce the number of female characters in the show. If you go back and watch the final episodes of that season, you'll notice something strange. Women barely appear. Female dialogue is almost non-existent. The red badge of gayness has almost no women in it at all. What little female dialogue remained in those late Season 3 episodes was voiced by Parker himself. The last episode to fully feature Bergman's voice was Starvin' Marvin in Space. But the final time her voice was heard in South Park was in Mr. Hankey's Christmas Classics, which had been recorded before her death. The episode's closing performance of Have Yourself a Merry Little Christmas features clips of every character she ever played, gathered together as the song plays. It wasn't planned as a tribute. The episode was already in production, but in the context of her death, it became one of the most heartbreaking moments in the show's history. Every character she brought to life, singing together one last time. Blame Canada was performed at the Academy Awards that year. It was originally planned that Bergman herself might perform it. Instead, Robin Williams sang the song in her tribute. The song lost to Phil Collins' You'll Be in My Heart from Tarzan, and Parker and Stone's long-running mockery of Phil Collins in subsequent seasons is at least partially rooted in that loss and what it represented. Mary Kay Bergman is buried at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills. Her grave features engraved images of 3 South Park characters she voiced: Leon Cartman, Sheila Broflovsky, and Wendy Testaberger. If you rewatch those first 3 seasons knowing what happened, the Christmas special hits different, especially that final song. After Bergman's death, voice actress Eliza Schneider stepped in to fill many of her roles, followed by Mona Marshall and eventually April Stewart, who remains on the show to this day. But it took multiple actresses to do what Bergman did alone. And given Parker and Stone's well-documented loyalty to their team, there's every reason to believe that if she had lived, Mary Kay Bergman would still be voicing those characters today, almost 30 years later. Moving to something that sounds like a fun production fact, but actually reveals a working environment that would make most people's heads spin: the 6-day production cycle. Since season 4, every single episode of South Park has been produced in approximately 6 days. From concept to air, 6 days. To put that in perspective, a typical animated sitcom takes 8 to 9 months to produce a single episode. The Simpsons takes about 8 months. Family Guy takes roughly the same. South Park does it in less than a week. The 2011 documentary 6 Days to Air showed exactly what this process looks like, and it's not pretty. Approximately 70 people work 100 to 120-hour weeks. Trey Parker writes the script, often rewriting it multiple times throughout the process. The animation team builds the episode as the script evolves, and the finished product is transmitted via satellite uplink to Comedy Central, sometimes just hours before the 10 p.m. broadcast on Wednesday night, sometimes minutes. This schedule is what allows South Park to be the most topical show on television. They can respond to news events that happened 4 days ago. They can parody a speech that aired last weekend. The speed is their greatest creative weapon. But it comes at a cost that nobody really talks about. 120-hour weeks means people are sleeping at the studio. It means Parker has been documented working through entire nights, rewriting scripts at 3 and 4 in the morning for an episode that will air that same evening. It means the production team is operating in a state of perpetual crunch that would be considered extreme by the standards of any industry, including the video game industry, which is already notorious for brutal crunch periods. In season 27, the 5th episode had to be delayed because the team couldn't finish it in time. Parker and Stone issued a public apology that read, "Apparently, when you do everything at the last minute, sometimes you don't get it done." It was played as a joke, but the underlying reality is that this production schedule has been running for over 20 years, and the only surprise is that it doesn't fail more often. Now for a piece of South Park trivia that sounds like a joke but is absolutely real and becomes more uncomfortable the longer you think about it. Cartman's mother is named after Trey Parker's ex-fiancée, Leanne Cartman, the most promiscuous character in South Park history, a woman who has slept with virtually every man in town, a woman who is depicted as sweet-natured but morally hollow, a woman whose sexual history is a running joke that has lasted for 28 seasons. Trey Parker was once engaged to a woman named Leanne. Before the wedding, he discovered she was cheating on him. His response was to name the most sexually voracious character in his cartoon after her, and ensure that the joke would run for decades. But it goes deeper than that. Stan Marsh's family shares the same first names as Trey Parker's real family. Kyle Broflovsky's parents share the same first names as Matt Stone's parents. The photo hanging in Cartman's house in the pilot episode is reportedly of Matt Stone's sister. And the fictional town of South Park, Colorado is modeled on the real South Park Basin and the Fairplay area where the creators spent time. They built an animated replica of their actual lives. They populated it with people they actually know, named after people they actually know. And then they spent nearly 3 decades publicly putting those characters through the most outrageous, degrading, and offensive scenarios they could imagine. All on national television. Whether this is cathartic or unhinged is a matter of personal opinion. But the fact that Leanne Cartman has been a running joke since 1997, meaning Trey Parker has been publicly ridiculing his ex-fiance's sexual history on television for almost 30 years, is a level of commitment to petty revenge that is genuinely staggering. And now for something that most fans consider one of South Park's darkest character moments, because it involves the one kid who is supposed to be the moral compass of the show doing something truly terrible. The Crack Baby Athletic Association. Season 15, Episode 5. Cartman discovers that babies born with substance dependencies will instinctively reach for a ball containing a substance when it's placed between them. His idea: film the babies fighting over the ball, package it as entertainment, sell it, and profit. The Crack Baby Athletic Association is born. This is already deeply uncomfortable, but the real darkness of the episode is what happens to Kyle. Kyle Broflovsky is the character who typically represents the show's conscience. He's the one who gives the "I learned something today" speeches. He's the one who pushes back against Cartman's worst impulses. He's the voice of reason in a town that has none. And in this episode, he sees a heartbreaking commercial about babies in need, is genuinely moved by it, and initially wants to help. Then he joins Cartman's scheme instead, not reluctantly, not as a spy. He willingly becomes a participant in the exploitation of the most vulnerable possible victims. He helps organize the operation. He justifies it to himself the same way Cartman does, using the same rationalizations, the same deflections. The episode draws a direct parallel to the NCAA's treatment of college athletes, suggesting that what Kyle is doing isn't morally different from what major American institutions do every day. But the visual metaphor they chose to make that point is babies with substance dependencies being exploited for entertainment. The thing that makes this episode disturbing isn't that Cartman does something evil. That's Tuesday. The thing that makes it disturbing is that Kyle, the kid who's supposed to know better, doesn't. And the show doesn't let him off the hook. It doesn't give him a redemption moment or a big speech about how he was wrong. He just does the thing and the episode ends. The moral compass broke and nobody fixed it. That wraps up Level 4, the darkness tier. The layer where real-world tragedy, punishing production schedules, and decades-long personal vendettas live side by side with a children's TV show about 4 kids in Colorado, and we're about to go even deeper. Level 5. The Banned and Censored. South Park has been on the air for almost 3 decades, and in that time, the show has been pulled from streaming platforms, censored by its own network, banned in multiple countries, and directly threatened by extremist organizations. The entries in this tier aren't just about episodes that made people uncomfortable, they're about episodes that governments, corporations, and dangerous people tried to erase from existence. Episodes 200 and 201, Season 14, Episodes 5 and 6, the episodes that nearly got the creators of South Park killed. These episodes were supposed to be a celebration, a milestone. South Park's 200th episode, designed to bring back nearly every celebrity the show had ever parodied. Tom Cruise, Barbra Streisand, Rob Reiner, the cast of characters that South Park had spent years mocking were all coming back for one massive, chaotic episode. It was supposed to be a love letter to the show's own history. But the central plot involved something that would turn the celebration into a crisis. The story revolved around the boys trying to protect the Prophet Muhammad from being shown on screen. Various groups within the episode's plot wanted Muhammad's supposed power to never be ridiculed. And the entire narrative became a meta-commentary on censorship, fear, and the limits of satire. 200 aired on April 14, 2010. The response was immediate. A radical organization posted a message on their website with what was interpreted as a warning that Trey Parker and Matt Stone would probably wind up like Theo van Gogh. For anyone unfamiliar, Theo van Gogh was a Dutch filmmaker who was murdered in 2004 for making a film critical of the treatment of women under Islam. The post included the addresses of South Park Studios in Los Angeles and Comedy Central's headquarters in New York. This was not an abstract philosophical disagreement. This was a direct implication of violence with enough specific information to act on it. The FBI and NYPD increased security around Parker and Stone's production offices. Their home addresses were scrubbed from public databases. For a period of time, the creators of an animated comedy about 4 kids in Colorado were under legitimate threat of physical harm because of a cartoon. And then 201 aired, or rather a version of 201 aired. Comedy Central, terrified by the threats, made a decision that would become one of the most ironic acts of censorship in television history. They bleeped out not only every reference to Muhammad in the episode, but also Kyle's entire closing speech. The speech was specifically about how intimidation and violence are the only things that actually work to silence people. Kyle was making the explicit point that fear wins, and Comedy Central proved him right by censoring the speech. The audio bleeps were so heavy and so constant that entire sections of the episode became incomprehensible. Dialogue that had nothing to do with Muhammad was bleeped. The episode's central argument was literally silenced. Neither 200 nor 201 has been made available on any streaming platform since. Both episodes were pulled from the official South Park website. And they weren't the only ones. In total, 5 episodes of South Park remain unavailable due to their depiction or discussion of Muhammad. Super Best Friends from Season 5, Cartoon Wars Part 1 and Part 2 from Season 10, and the 200th and 201st episodes from Season 14. All 5 have been removed from streaming bundles, syndication packages, and online platforms. 5 episodes out of 338 erased. Not because they weren't good, not because they were offensive to the general audience, but because specific threats of violence made a major media corporation decide that the risk wasn't worth it. And here's the part that sits with you. The speech that Comedy Central censored was making exactly one point, that the only way to actually stop free expression is through fear and violence. By censoring that speech, Comedy Central didn't just miss the point, they became the point. Parker and Stone have spoken about this experience multiple times. They've described it as the moment where the show stopped being purely about comedy and became about something bigger. The moment where the joke and the reality collided in a way that neither of them ever expected when they started drawing construction paper characters in their apartment. Now let's talk about the time South Park got itself banned by an entire country. Banned in China, Season 23, 2019. The episode tells 2 parallel stories. In one, Stan forms a band that gets a record deal, but the label demands they change their lyrics and image to comply with Chinese censorship standards so they can access the Chinese market. In the other, Randy gets caught smuggling marijuana into China and is sent to a forced labor camp where he encounters Winnie the Pooh. Now, Winnie the Pooh had already been banned in China because internet users had been using the character as a caricature of President Xi Jinping. The comparison had gone viral, and the Chinese government's response was to ban all depictions of the cartoon bear. So when South Park put Winnie the Pooh in a Chinese prison camp, sitting in a cell next to characters who had similarly offended the Chinese government, the message was impossible to miss. The Chinese government's response was total. They enacted a blanket ban on the entire South Park franchise. Every episode, every mention, scrubbed from Baidu, the Chinese equivalent of Google, removed from Douban, the major Chinese review platform, deleted from Zhihu, Bilibili, Sina Weibo, and WeChat. Every trace of South Park's existence was erased from the Chinese internet. You could not search for the show, you could not discuss it, you could not find it. In a country of over 1.4 billion people, South Park simply ceased to exist. Parker and Stone responded with what has become one of the most legendary statements in the show's history. They issued a mock apology that read, in part, "Like the NBA, we welcome the Chinese censors into our homes and into our hearts. We too love money more than freedom and democracy. She doesn't look just like Winnie the Pooh at all. Long live the great Communist Party of China. May this autumn's sorghum harvest be bountiful. We good now, China?" The statement accomplished two things simultaneously. It made Parker and Stone's position on Chinese censorship absolutely clear, while also mocking every Western company that had quietly complied with Chinese censorship demands to protect their market access. The NBA had just gone through its own controversy with a general manager's tweet about Hong Kong. Hollywood studios had been routinely editing films to remove content that might offend Chinese censors. And here were two guys from Colorado essentially saying, "We're not going to do that, and we think the companies that do are cowards." South Park remains banned in China. Staying in the territory of religious controversy, there's Bloody Mary, Season 9, Episode 14. This episode depicted a statue of the Virgin Mary that appeared to be bleeding. Pope Benedict XVI arrives to investigate and ultimately determines that the statue is actually menstruating. He declares this unremarkable and leaves. The Catholic League for Religious and Civil Rights launched an aggressive campaign against the episode. William Donahue, the organization's president, called it one of the most vicious anti-Catholic assaults ever aired on television. Multiple Catholic organizations demanded the episode be permanently removed from rotation. Pressure was applied to Viacom, Comedy Central's parent company, from religious groups across the country. The episode was briefly pulled from reruns, which represented a rare win for the protest movement, but it was eventually restored. And the controversy cemented something that would become a recurring pattern with South Park. Religious organizations would protest, media outlets would cover the protest would drive more people to watch the episode, and the controversy would ultimately make the show more popular. Parker and Stone understood this cycle better than anyone, and they rarely seemed bothered by it. But not every piece of South Park controversy played out on television. Some of it showed up in video games. The Stick of Truth, released in 2014, South Park's first major role-playing game, was met with critical acclaim when it launched. Reviewers loved the writing, the faithfulness to the show's humor, and the gameplay. But in Australia, the game was initially banned outright. The reason was twofold. The game contained an interactive alien probing sequence and an interactive abortion minigame, both of which Australian censors deemed too extreme for release. A censored version was eventually released for the Australian, European, and Israeli markets. The removed scenes were replaced with text descriptions of what the player was missing, narrated by a crying koala in the Australian version and accompanied by an image of a famous statue in the European version. Parker and Stone actually wrote the replacement text themselves, and many players argued that the censored version was actually funnier than the original because the dry descriptions of what was being censored were more entertaining than the content itself. While we're still in Level 5, let's talk about an episode that sits in a strange space between comedy and something that feels dangerously real. Dead Kids, Season 22, Episode 1, the season premiere. School shootings have become so routine at South Park Elementary that the parents, teachers, and students treat them as minor inconveniences. Gunfire erupts during class and the kids barely flinch. Parents get phone calls about incidents at school and respond with mild annoyance, the way you'd react to a traffic jam or a delayed flight. The only person who is genuinely disturbed by what's happening is Sharon Marsh, Stan's mother. She can't sleep, she can't function. She's horrified by the violence and even more horrified by everyone else's apathy. But instead of anyone taking her concerns seriously, she's treated as the problem. She's told she's overreacting. She's accused of being hysterical. Her friends and family act like she's the crazy one for being upset that children are dying in school. The episode offers no solution, no hopeful ending, no moment where the town comes to its senses. Sharon is simply worn down until she stops caring too. She joins everyone else in treating the unthinkable as normal. The episode ends with the system intact and nothing changed. There are a lot of dark South Park episodes. There are episodes with more shocking imagery, more graphic content, more outrageous plot twists. But Dead Kids might be the one that lingers the longest because it doesn't give you anything to laugh at. It doesn't give you a villain to blame or a twist to process. It just shows you a world where the worst thing imaginable has become boring, and the only sane reaction is treated as a disorder. And that brings us to the end of Level 5, the banned and censored tier, the layer where South Park collided with governments, extremist groups, billion-dollar corporations, and the kind of real-world violence that animated comedies aren't supposed to have anything to do with. But we're not done. There are 2 more levels to go, and they're the deepest. Level 6, real-world darkness. The entries from here on are about the places where South Park and reality became impossible to separate, where production decisions were shaped by genuine grief, where the show's impact rippled outward in ways that nobody could have predicted, and where the line between it's just a cartoon and this actually affected real people's lives disappeared entirely. Let's start with a question that has never been fully answered, and that changes the entire narrative around one of the most important departures in South Park history. Did Isaac Hayes actually quit, or was the decision made for him? Here's what the public record says. In March 2006, following the airing of Trapped in the Closet, which savagely mocked Scientology, a statement was released in Isaac Hayes' name announcing his departure from South Park. The statement said he could no longer be associated with a show that showed insensitivity towards personal spiritual beliefs. Parker and Stone's response was immediate and sharp. They pointed out that Hayes had been on the show for 9 seasons while it relentlessly mocked Christianity, Judaism, Islam, Mormonism, Catholicism, Hinduism, and Buddhism. He had read lines that ridiculed dozens of belief systems without a single complaint. The objection only emerged when his own religion was targeted. But then the complication. Isaac Hayes had suffered a stroke in January 2006, just weeks before his departure was announced. His son, Isaac Hayes III, said publicly that his father did not personally issue the resignation statement. The implication, which Hayes' son never fully stated directly, but which was heavily implied, was that people connected to the Church of Scientology made the decision on Hayes' behalf while he was in a compromised state of health following his stroke. Think about what that means if it's true. A man who had been one of the most beloved parts of a beloved show for nearly a decade was potentially removed from his role not by his own choice, but by the organization he belonged to. And then the show, believing he had voluntarily left and betrayed their friendship, killed his character in the most violent, disrespectful way possible. If Hayes didn't actually want to leave, then the return of Chef isn't just a cruel send-off. It's a tragedy within a tragedy. A man's creative legacy being destroyed on national television based on a misunderstanding that was potentially engineered by a third party. And Hayes himself, recovering from a stroke, may not have been in a position to clarify or correct the record. Isaac Hayes died on August 10, 2008, from another stroke. He was 65 years old. The question of whether he chose to leave or was pushed out has never been conclusively resolved, and Chef has never returned to the show. Now for something that sounds like it should be a fun fact, but is actually a window into how South Park's very existence changed the television landscape in ways that had real financial consequences for real people. South Park single-handedly built Comedy Central. When South Park premiered on August 13, 1997, Comedy Central was available in approximately 9 million households. It was a small cable channel that most Americans had never heard of. Within a year of South Park's debut, that number had exploded to 50 million households. The show's premiere pulled a modest 1.3 Nielsen rating, about 980,000 viewers. By the 10th episode of the first season, the rating had skyrocketed to 6.4. The most watched episode of the entire series, Cartman's Mom is a Dirty Slut, pulled approximately 6.2 to 6.4 million viewers and an 8.2 Nielsen rating, which at the time was a record for non-sports basic cable programming. A single animated show about foul-mouthed children transformed a niche cable channel into a national network. Every employee at Comedy Central, every show that later aired on that network, every career that was built there, all of it was downstream from South Park. The network existed in its current form because two guys made a cartoon that said things you weren't supposed to say on television. And the content that accomplished this would be considered unprintable by broadcast standards. The very first episode involves alien anal probing. The show holds the record for uncensored profanity in a single episode. It has been banned in multiple countries, and it took a network from 9 million homes to 50 million in about 12 months. Whether you think that's a testament to the power of provocative art or a commentary on what American audiences actually want when nobody's watching over their shoulder is entirely up to you. Let's talk about Kenny's theme song, because there's something hiding in the opening credits that has been there for decades, and it's far worse than you think. During South Park's opening credits, all four boys sing the theme song, but Kenny's line is almost completely incomprehensible because his hood covers his mouth, muffling everything he says. For years, viewers assumed he was either saying something random or just humming along. He's not. Kenny's lyrics have always been extremely vulgar. In the early seasons, his line described in graphic detail what he enjoyed about girls. In later seasons, the lyrics changed to describe what he wanted to do with specific celebrities. The content is deliberately obscene, intentionally hidden by the muffling effect, and has been running since 1997. During season 6, when Kenny was canonically dead, his line in the intro was replaced by Timmy singing about himself. When Kenny returned, so did the vulgar lyrics. They've been there ever since. If you slow down the audio and enhance it, which fans have done extensively, you can hear exactly what Kenny is saying. And it is significantly worse than anything you've imagined. This detail has been hiding in the opening credits of every single episode for almost 3 decades. It's not buried in a background or hidden in a single frame. It plays at the start of every episode, broadcast to millions of viewers, and almost nobody can understand it without audio enhancement. It's been sitting right there in plain sight since the very beginning. Now, let's go back to the topic of the show's voice actresses in a detail that adds another layer to the Mary Kay Bergman story. After Bergman's death in 1999, her roles were initially taken over by Eliza Schneider, who voiced the characters from 1999 through 2003. Schneider then departed, and the roles were split between April Stewart and Mona Marshall, both of whom continue to voice Bergman's former characters today. But there's a detail about the transition that most fans don't know. When Parker and Stone were looking for a replacement after Bergman's death, they weren't just looking for someone who could do the voices. They were looking for someone who could do what Bergman did, which was voice almost every single female character in the show. One person, doing dozens of distinct voices. And what they discovered was that it was essentially impossible to find someone who could match what she had been doing. That's why the roles were eventually split between multiple actresses. Bergman was a once-in-a-generation talent who happened to be in the right place at the right time. And after she was gone, it took a team to replace her. The fact that the show eventually needed 4 different voice actresses doing the work that Bergman did alone tells you something about how extraordinary she was. And here's a piece of South Park production history that sounds like a joke, but reveals something genuinely uncomfortable about how fame and money intersect with creative integrity. In July 2025, Parker and Stone signed a new deal with Paramount Global worth $1.5 billion. That's billion, with a B. The deal guarantees approximately 50 new episodes, roughly 10 per year, and secures the show through at least 2029 to 2030. Now think about what this means in context. This is a show that has been banned in China, banned in India, received death threats from extremist organizations, had 5 episodes permanently pulled from every streaming platform, caused multiple diplomatic incidents, cost Comedy Central millions and lost advertising from boycotts, and depicted virtually every world leader in compromising or degrading scenarios. And a major media corporation decided all of that was worth $1.5 billion. The deal essentially means that Paramount is paying Parker and Stone to keep causing international incidents, keep triggering government bans, keep getting censored, and keep producing content that, by any reasonable corporate risk assessment, should be considered a liability. But the show makes too much money. The brand is too valuable. The cultural influence is too significant. $1.5 billion to keep making the thing that gets them in trouble. That's either a testament to Parker and Stone's irreplaceability or the most expensive insurance policy a media company has ever purchased for controlled chaos. And while we're talking about the show's recent output, let's touch on something that happened in 2025 that would have seemed impossible to predict even 5 years ago. Season 27 depicted Donald Trump in a romantic relationship with Satan. The season, which aired in the summer of 2025, featured a highly serialized narrative centered on a caricature of Donald Trump during his second administration. The central conceit was that Trump and Satan were in an abusive romantic relationship, with Satan depicted as trapped in the White House, miserable and unable to leave. Reporters in the show repeatedly asked Trump if he's involved with Satan. Trump denies it every time. Satan sits alone and depressed, telling J.D. Vance that dark forces are keeping him there. The season pulled 5.9 million cross-platform viewers for its premiere, a 68% increase over the previous season and Comedy Central's biggest premiere audience since 1999. The following season, season 28, went even further. It depicted Trump and J.D. Vance conspiring to secretly terminate Satan's pregnancy. PC Principal physically fights Jesus Christ over the state of modern Christianity. Children across South Park performed satanic rituals linked to Labubu toy unboxing videos. And a character based on Peter Thiel investigates internet memes as potential antichrist cults. This was happening on television in 2025, on a show that just signed a $1.5 billion deal about 4 kids in Colorado. And that brings us to the end of Level 6, the real-world darkness tier, where the show's creators grieved in public, where a man may have been removed from his own role without his consent, where a niche cable channel became a national network on the back of cartoon profanity, and where one of the biggest media deals in entertainment history was signed to keep a show running that is actively banned by multiple world governments. One level left. Level 7, the Abyss. This is the bottom of the iceberg, the entries that even dedicated South Park fans rarely talk about. The origins that almost nobody knows, the details so specific, so buried, and so uncomfortable that they exist at the very edge of what the show's history has to offer. South Park didn't start on Comedy Central. It didn't start in a studio. It didn't even start with a script. It started with construction paper, a basement, and a video camera. The spirit of Christmas. That's where all of this began. And the story of how it went from a college project to a cultural phenomenon is one of the strangest origin stories in entertainment history. In 1992, Trey Parker and Matt Stone were students at the University of Colorado. They made a short animated film called Jesus vs. Frosty, using actual construction paper cutouts, filmed with a stop-motion technique. The animation is crude, the voices are rough. The whole thing looks like a school project because that's exactly what it was. But the premise, Jesus Christ fighting Frosty the Snowman in a violent, profane, absurd battle, was unlike anything that existed in animation at the time. 3 years later, in 1995, a Fox executive named Brian Graydon paid Parker and Stone to make a video Christmas card he could send to friends. They created a second short called Jesus vs. Santa, using the same construction paper technique, but with significantly better animation and sharper writing. The short depicted Jesus and Santa Claus getting into a bloody fistfight over the true meaning of Christmas. with the boys from what would eventually become South Park caught in the middle. Graydon sent the video to about 100 people as a Christmas gift. And then something happened that had essentially never happened before in human history. The video went viral, not online because the internet as we know it barely existed in 1995. It went viral through VHS tapes. People physically copied the tape, passed it to friends who copied it and passed it to their friends. Within weeks, hundreds of thousands of copies were circulating across the country. Office workers were dubbing it onto blank tapes and handing them out. College students were screening it at parties. This was 1995. YouTube wouldn't exist for another 10 years. The concept of a viral video wasn't a thing yet. There was no infrastructure for this kind of rapid, organic distribution. And yet, somehow, a crude construction paper cartoon about Jesus fighting Santa spread across America through the physical reproduction of magnetic tape. It may have been one of the first true viral videos in history, and it spread through a medium that required people to actually sit down with 2 VCRs and press record. That hand-to-hand distribution is what caught Comedy Central's attention. They saw that people were desperate enough for this content to spend time and money duplicating VHS tapes, which meant there was an audience waiting for it. In August 1997, South Park premiered, and the rest is the history we've been discussing for the past hour. But here's the detail about Jesus versus Frosty that almost nobody knows. The characters in that 1992 short don't have the names we know today. There's a character who looks like Cartman, but he's actually a prototype of a different character. The boys don't really have established personalities yet. It's essentially a different show with a similar art style. The version of South Park that we know with Stan, Kyle, Cartman, and Kenny as defined characters didn't fully crystallize until Jesus versus Santa in 1995, and even then continued evolving through the first season. What this means is that the show that generated death threats, government bans, a $1.5 billion deal, and 28 seasons of some of the most provocative content in television history started as a literal arts and crafts project. 2 college kids with scissors and glue. Now for one of the deepest entries on this entire iceberg, something that exists at the intersection of South Park, real law enforcement, and a question about the show's cultural influence that nobody has a comfortable answer to. South Park's influence on the word derp. This sounds like a joke entry, but stay with me because the actual story is genuinely weird. The word derp as a standalone expression of stupidity or clumsiness was popularized by South Park. It appeared in the 1999 film Basketball, which starred Parker and Stone, and was used in South Park itself, starting with the character Mr. Derp, who replaced Chef temporarily in season 3. From there, it entered internet culture, became a meme, and eventually made its way into mainstream English usage. The word is now used so widely that some linguists have traced its modern prevalence almost entirely to Parker and Stone's work. A word that now exists in dictionaries and is used by millions of English speakers daily was essentially invented by 2 guys who were making fun of stupid comedy in a movie they didn't think anyone would remember. The show hasn't just influenced pop culture, it has literally changed the English language. And that's a level of cultural penetration that goes beyond entertainment and into something that feels almost permanent. And staying at the deepest level of the iceberg, let's talk about the show's relationship with the very concept of death, because South Park's treatment of mortality is something that deserves a closer look than it usually gets. South Park has killed more characters than almost any show in television history. Kenny alone has died hundreds of times, but beyond the running gag, the show has dealt with death in ways that are sometimes funny, sometimes cruel, and occasionally devastatingly real. Chef's death was a statement about friendship and betrayal. Kenny's deaths are an existential horror played for laughs. Pip was crushed by Micah Streisand in 201. The school bus driver, Miss Crabtree, was murdered by a serial killer in season 8. Satan himself was killed by Man Bear Pig in season 22. And then there are the deaths that happen to unnamed characters. the background residents of South Park who are destroyed by alien invasions, natural disasters, and the general chaos of living in the most dangerous small town in America. But the show has also dealt with death in a meta sense, through the real-world losses that have shaped its production. Mary Kay Bergman's suicide in 1999, Isaac Hayes' death in 2008. The way the show processes these losses, sometimes through direct tribute and sometimes through bitter, angry storytelling, reveals something about how Parker and Stone use their art to handle grief. Mr. Hankey's Christmas Classics became an accidental farewell to Bergman. The Return of Chef was an intentional, furious goodbye to Hayes. Both episodes were shaped by real death, and both episodes hit differently when you know what was happening behind the scenes. The show has always treated death as something to be laughed at, but the times when death got too close to the people making it, those are the moments where the laughing stops and something else takes over. And now for the final entry at the absolute bottom of this iceberg, something that ties together everything we've discussed and reveals the fundamental truth about what South Park actually is. Parker and Stone almost quit after season 5, and the reason is one of the most overlooked facts in the show's entire history. After the end of season 5, which contained Scott Tenorman must die, It Hits the Fan, and the permanent death of Kenny, the creators seriously considered ending the show. They felt creatively exhausted. They felt like they had pushed the boundaries of what the show could do as far as they could push them. Kyle was almost killed off permanently at the end of that season, which would have fundamentally broken the show's formula. Think about that. Everything from season 6 onward, the Woodland Critter Christmas, the Muhammad controversies, the China ban, the Britney Spears prophecy, the $1.5 billion deal, all of it almost didn't happen. The show that would eventually become one of the most culturally influential programs in American television history nearly ended after 5 seasons because its creators were tired. They didn't quit, obviously, but the fact that they almost did changes how you view everything that came after. Every season from 6 to 28 is borrowed time. Every episode is one that might not have existed if Parker and Stone had made a different decision in 2001. And some of the show's most important, most controversial, and most disturbing moments came after that near ending. The Muhammad episodes that resulted in death threats after the near quit, the Isaac Hayes departure and Chef's death after the near quit, Britney's new look and its accidental prophecy after the near quit, the China ban after the near quit, the $1.5 billion deal after the near quit, 23 additional seasons of the most provocative content in animated television, all of which almost never happened because 2 guys from Colorado were tired after season 5. And that's the bottom of the iceberg, the absolute floor, the place where South Park's entire history converges into a single uncomfortable truth. This show was never supposed to last this long. It was never supposed to get this big. It was never supposed to matter this much. It started as a construction papercraft project, almost died in its 5th year, and somehow became a $1.5 billion cultural institution that has been banned by governments, threatened by extremists, and mourned for people it lost along the way. 28 seasons, 338 episodes, a show that started on VHS tapes passed between friends in 1995, that now exists in the highest echelons of entertainment industry deal-making. And the 2 guys who started it, they're still making each episode in 6 days, still submitting them hours before they air, still trusting that the audience can handle whatever they decide to put on screen next. That's South Park, a show about 4 kids in a small town in Colorado. And somehow, after everything we've covered today, that description still doesn't come close to capturing what it actually is. But before we close out this iceberg entirely, there are more entries we need to cover, because 30 items across 7 levels means we've still got ground to explore. And some of the entries I saved for last are the ones that linger the most. So let's go back through the layers and fill in the gaps. Back in level 2, I skipped over an episode that deserves its own extended discussion because it combines graphic content, genuine controversy, and one of the most uncomfortable viewing experiences the show has ever produced. Proper condom use. Season 5, Episode 7. This episode opens with Cartman telling his friends about a technique he learned involving a dog. He describes it enthusiastically, his friends are fascinated, and then Stan goes home and performs the act on his family's dog in front of his parents' entire book club. The reaction from the parents is, understandably, horror. But rather than having a normal conversation with their children about bodies and boundaries, the town decides to lower the age at which sex education is taught in school. The result is that Mr. Mackey and Mrs. Chalk-Sondick are tasked with teaching kindergartners about reproduction. What follows is a cascade of misinformation, paranoia, and graphic imagery that escalates throughout the episode. The boys become convinced that girls carry horrifying diseases. The girls become convinced that boys are biological hazards. Both groups arm themselves and prepare for what they believe is an inevitable confrontation. Meanwhile, Mr. Mackey and Miss Chalk-Sondick begin a sexual relationship that is depicted in a level of graphic detail that made a lot of viewers physically uncomfortable. The episode's satirical point is about how badly adults handle sex education, how fear-based approaches create more problems than they solve, and how the people responsible for teaching children about these topics are often the least qualified to do so. But the execution of that satire involves fourth graders discussing STDs in medical detail, a child performing acts on a family pet, and teacher-on-teacher encounters that are animated with an attention to realism that nobody asked for. This episode is consistently ranked among the most disturbing South Park episodes ever produced, and it's from the same season as Scott Tenorman Must Die. Season 5 was really something else. Let's also go deeper on an episode we touched on earlier but didn't fully unpack because the details of this one get significantly worse the closer you look. The Return of the Fellowship of the Ring to the Two Towers, Season 6, Episode 13. This episode holds a 9.4 out of 10 on IMDb, making it the third highest rated episode in the show's entire history. The premise is that the boys are playing a Lord of the Rings style fantasy game around the neighborhood, and Butters' parents accidentally give them a hardcore adult film instead of the Lord of the Rings DVD they meant to return. The boys hand the tape to Butters for safekeeping, not knowing what's on it. And Butters watches it. When the boys realize what happened, they race to get the tape back. But Butters has already been changed. He's become obsessed with what he saw, mimicking the behavior of the characters in the film. The episode plays this as a parallel to the One Ring's corrupting influence from Tolkien's work, with the adult film as the corrupting object that warps everyone who comes into contact with it. The disturbing element here isn't the adult content itself, which is kept off screen, it's the implication. A young child has been exposed to explicit material and is now exhibiting behavioral changes as a result. The show treats this as comedy, and the Lord of the Rings framing does distance the audience from the reality of the situation. But underneath the fantasy parody, the episode is about a child being psychologically affected by content he was never supposed to see. And the fact that it happened because of adult carelessness makes it hit harder than most viewers expect from what initially seems like a lighthearted parody episode. The episode ends with the parents finding the boys watching the tape and being forced to have an extremely uncomfortable conversation about what they just saw. Stan's dad, Randy, stammers through an explanation of backdoor action, while the boys stare at him in confusion. The discomfort is palpable, and it's one of the rare moments where the show lets the adults face genuine consequences for their negligence rather than sweeping it under the rug. Now, let's add another entry to level 3 that we haven't discussed yet, but that fits perfectly into the hidden details tier. Leanne Cartman's real identity and the show's longest-running parentage mystery. For years, one of South Park's most persistent mysteries was the identity of Cartman's father. The show teased it constantly. In the season 1 finale, Cartman's mom is a dirty slut. The town discovers that Leanne Cartman had been with essentially every adult male in South Park on the night of the annual drunken barn dance, making it impossible to determine who fathered Eric. The Season 2 premiere was supposed to resolve the mystery. Viewers waited months to find out who Cartman's dad was, and when the episode aired, instead of revealing the answer, the show aired a completely unrelated Terrence and Philip special. This was done intentionally as a direct troll to the audience. Parker and Stone thought it was hilarious. Fans were furious. When the actual answer finally came in a later episode, it was revealed that Leanne Cartman is actually a hermaphrodite and is, biologically, Eric's father. His mother was never identified. This answer seemed to close the book on the mystery. But then 201 came along over a decade later and revealed that the original DNA test had been tampered with. The real truth was that Cartman's father was Jack Tenorman, a member of the Denver Broncos, which also made Scott Tenorman, the kid from the Chili episode, Cartman's half-brother, which means, once again, that Cartman arranged the death of his own biological father and fed him to his own half-brother in a bowl of chili. This revelation was delivered in the same episode that received death threats and was censored into incomprehensibility by Comedy Central. Many viewers have literally never heard this plot point because it was buried under audio bleeps. One of the darkest revelations in the show's history was effectively hidden by the same censorship that was meant to protect the network from controversy. Let's also expand on something from Level 4 that we mentioned briefly, but that has much more depth to it. The Trapped in the Closet Scientology episode, Season 9, Episode 12. This episode didn't just mock Scientology, it laid out, in animated form with completely straight-faced narration, the actual core beliefs of the Church of Scientology. The story of Xenu, the intergalactic dictator who brought billions of beings to Earth in spacecraft resembling Douglas DC-8 airplanes, stacked them around volcanoes, and killed them with hydrogen bombs. The souls of these beings, called Thetans, supposedly attach themselves to living humans and cause all of humanity's problems. While the story was being told on screen, a subtitle appeared that read, "This is what Scientologists actually believe." Tom Cruise was depicted in the episode literally refusing to come out of a closet, while Stan, who Scientology had identified as a potential leader, was pressured to accept the religion's teachings. The episode portrayed Scientology founder L. Ron Hubbard as a science fiction writer who invented a religion to make money and included the famous line, "Why won't Tom Cruise just come out of the closet?" The fallout was enormous. Tom Cruise reportedly threatened to refuse to promote the Paramount film mission. Impossible 3 if the episode was rerun. Viacom, which owned both Paramount and Comedy Central, pulled the planned rerun. Parker and Stone responded with a statement that read, "So Scientology, you may have won this battle, but the million-year war for Earth has just begun." Isaac Hayes' departure followed shortly after, and the chain of events that led to Chef's death began. The episode also drew significant legal attention from the Church of Scientology, which has a long history of aggressive litigation against its critics. Parker and Stone have said in interviews that their attorneys advised them to be prepared for lawsuits after the episode aired, and if we're going to fully explore the Scientology thread, there's another layer that most people don't know about. The end credits of Trapped in the Closet listed every single writer, director, and producer on the episode as John Smith or Jane Smith. This was done as a preemptive measure. Parker and Stone knew that Scientology had a documented practice of targeting individual critics, and they didn't want any member of their production team to become a target. Think about that. The people who made this episode were afraid enough of retaliation that they hid their names from the credits. This wasn't a theoretical concern. The Church of Scientology's fair game policy, which targets critics and detractors of the organization, was well documented. The South Park team took the threat seriously enough to anonymize everyone involved in the production. An animated comedy about 4 kids in Colorado with anonymized credits because the people who made it were afraid of a religious organization. Now let's go even deeper on an aspect of the show we only touched on briefly. the way South Park handles mental illness. Throughout the series, mental health is depicted in ways that range from surprisingly sensitive to deeply uncomfortable. Tweak Tweak, the hyperactive, anxiety-ridden child who was introduced as a joke character, has been gradually developed over the seasons into a genuinely sympathetic portrayal of someone struggling with severe anxiety. His relationship with Craig Tucker, which began as a joke in Tweak X Craig when the town tried to force them into a relationship, has become one of the show's most enduring and unexpectedly heartwarming storylines. But on the other end of the spectrum, the show has treated mental illness as a punchline in ways that make many viewers uncomfortable. Cartman faking Tourette's syndrome in Le Petit Tourette. The portrayal of various disabilities through Jimmy Valmer and Timmy Birch, which oscillates between genuine advocacy and tasteless humor depending on the episode. The depiction of Mr. Garrison's various identity crises across multiple seasons, which has been criticized for trivializing real experiences. And then there's the Towley intervention episode, Crippled Summer, from season 14. This episode was structured as a direct parody of the A&E show Intervention, complete with a replica disclaimer at the beginning. The episode depicted Towley's escalating substance dependencies destroying his relationships, his career, and his life. It's played for comedy, but the structure mirrors real intervention episodes so closely that some viewers found the humor uncomfortably thin. The show's relationship with mental health is complicated precisely because it refuses to be consistent about it. It can make you cry with Stan's depression in You're Getting Old, and then make you cringe with a disability joke 3 episodes later. That inconsistency isn't accidental. Parker and Stone have always maintained that either everything is fair game or nothing is. And the result is a show that sometimes handles serious topics with genuine compassion, and other times treats them like any other target. Here's another entry for the deeper levels that we haven't addressed yet. Good Times with Weapons, Season 8, Episode 1. The boys buy ninja weapons at a county fair and begin an elaborate fantasy sequence animated in full anime style. The animation shift is jarring and beautiful, with the crude South Park characters suddenly rendered as dramatic, stylized Japanese warriors. But the episode's darkness comes from a very specific moment. During the boys' fantasy battle, Butters is accidentally hit in the eye with a throwing star, a real throwing star, and it's stuck in his eye. The show suddenly snaps back from the anime fantasy to standard South Park animation, and Butters is standing there with a throwing star embedded in his face, bleeding. The boys' response is not to take him to a hospital. It's to disguise him as a dog and try to get him to a veterinarian so they don't get in trouble with their parents. Meanwhile, Cartman has been planning to show off his power at the county fair talent show. His plan involves going on stage completely naked and performing what he claims is a martial arts demonstration. The town is so horrified by Cartman's nudity that they completely ignore the fact that a child has a metal weapon lodged in his eye. The satire is about how American culture reacts more strongly to nudity than to violence. A child's naked body causes more outrage than a child's injury, and that's the joke. But the image of Butters, hurt, scared, and ignored while the town loses its mind over something harmless is an entry point into one of the show's most consistent and uncomfortable themes. Violence against children is funny, nudity is scandalous, and nobody in the show's universe questions why those priorities exist. Let's also add one more entry about the show's relationship with real-world politics, because there's a detail from the 2016 election season that most fans have either forgotten or never knew. Season 20, which aired in 2016, was South Park's most heavily serialized season. It ran as a single continuous 10-episode arc that attempted to satirize the presidential election, internet trolling, and social media culture all at once. Mr. Garrison, who had been the show's Donald Trump analog since season 19, was running for president on a platform of essentially being terrible on purpose. But here's the part nobody talks about. The show had been writing under the assumption that Hillary Clinton would win the election. The episode that aired the night after the election was supposed to be a response to her victory. Instead, Trump won. Parker and Stone had to rewrite the episode overnight. The version that aired reflected the shock and confusion that much of the country was feeling. But it was also clearly a show that had been caught off guard. The serialized structure of the season meant they couldn't simply ignore what had happened or reset. They had to pivot an entire multi-episode storyline in real time. The result was a season that many fans consider one of the show's weakest, precisely because the serialized format couldn't absorb the shock of reality contradicting the show's planned narrative. The show that prides itself on responding to events in real time was, for the first time, genuinely blindsided by reality. And for our very last entry, something that ties back to the very first thing we discussed. South Park deliberately avoided parodying Trump during the 2024 election. Parker and Stone stated publicly in September 2024 that they intended to delay season 27 until 2025, specifically to avoid having to parody the 2024 presidential election. After the experience of season 20, where the election result upended their entire planned storyline, they didn't want to be caught in the same trap again. When season 27 finally aired in July 2025, well after the election was settled, they felt safe to tackle Trump again. And they did, with the Trump-Satan romance that pulled nearly 6 million viewers. But the fact that the creators of South Park, two men who have built their careers on fearlessly satirizing everything and everyone, deliberately chose to sit out an election rather than risk being wrong, again tells you something about the limits of even the most fearless satirists. There are things that even South Park won't gamble on, and the unpredictability of American democracy apparently is one of them. And since we're at the very bottom of this iceberg, let me take you through a few more entries that deserve their place in these final depths. Because the thing about South Park is that no matter how far down you dig, there's always another layer. Let's go back and talk about one of the most disturbing visual sequences in the show's history, something that manages to be both a masterpiece of comedy writing and one of the most graphic things ever aired on basic cable at the same time: the human Centipad. Season 15, Episode 1, the Season 15 premiere. Kyle, being Kyle, clicks agree on an Apple Terms and Conditions update without reading it. This is something literally everyone does. But in South Park's universe, that blind agreement has consequences. Apple interprets the terms literally, and Kyle is selected for an experiment that directly references the notorious 2009 horror film, The Human Centipede. Kyle is surgically attached to two other people in a configuration that mirrors the film. His mouth is sewn to the body of the person in front of him. The person behind him is attached to Kyle in the same fashion. The show doesn't shy away from the visual. The surgical procedure is animated with enough detail that you understand exactly what's happening, and the aftermath is depicted with the kind of commitment that South Park brings to its darkest concepts. Meanwhile, Cartman throws a tantrum because his mother bought him an iPad instead of the newer model. His entitled rage escalates throughout the episode, eventually leading to a parody of a talk show where the host is stunned by Cartman's behavior. The contrast between Kyle's genuinely horrifying predicament and Cartman's trivial consumer complaint is the episode's central joke. But the Kyle storyline is disturbing enough that a lot of viewers found it hard to laugh. The satire is about two things. First, how nobody reads terms and conditions, and how the power imbalance between tech companies and consumers means we've essentially given up our autonomy for convenience. Second, how entitlement culture creates a situation where people react to minor consumer inconveniences with the same intensity that should be reserved for actual emergencies. But strip away the satire and what you're left with is an animated scene of a fourth grader being surgically mutilated because he didn't read the fine print on a software update. And that image, no matter how funny the surrounding context might be, is something that stays with you. While we're going through the deepest entries, let's talk about something that exists at the intersection of South Park and actual criminal law. Cartman's criminal record across the series. If you actually catalog every crime Eric Cartman commits throughout 28 seasons of South Park, the list is staggering. And I mean genuinely staggering, not just cartoon character who does bad things staggering. This is a fictional fourth grader who, over the course of the series, has committed acts that would constitute multiple life sentences if he were a real person. He arranged the murder of 2 people and fed their remains to their son. He started a hate group. He faked having a disability to compete in the Special Olympics. He attempted to exterminate an entire ethnic group by reenacting scenes from a historical genocide, which the show depicted in full. He enslaved an entire race of beings in the Imagination Land episodes. He manipulated a girl into an abusive relationship that spanned multiple seasons. He tried to restart the Civil War so the South would win. He infected Kyle with HIV intentionally. He committed multiple acts of fraud, theft, assault, blackmail, and identity theft. And those are just the highlights. The show treats all of this as comedy, and for the most part, Cartman never faces lasting consequences. He's arrested occasionally. He's punished occasionally, but by the next episode, the slate is cleaned. The running joke is that a 9-year-old is essentially the most dangerous person in his small town, and nobody can stop him because the adults are either too incompetent or too distracted to intervene. But when you actually write the list down, when you see it all in one place, the scale of it becomes uncomfortable. Not because any individual act is taken seriously by the show, but because the cumulative weight of it reveals a character who, in any realistic context, would be considered a genuine threat. The show knows this, it's part of the joke, but the joke only works if you don't think about it too hard, and the bottom of the iceberg is exactly the place where you start thinking about things too hard. Here's another entry for the deepest level that involves something the show did with sound design that most people have never noticed. The original animation versus the modern animation. Seasons 1 through 12 of South Park were originally produced in standard definition, 4:3 aspect ratio. The animation was cruder, darker, and had a different feel than modern episodes. But here's the part that few people know. Every single one of those early episodes has been digitally re-rendered from the original archived Maya and Alias Power Animator scene files into full 1080 PHD and 16:9 widescreen. What this means is that the version of early South Park available on streaming today is not the version that originally aired. It's been reformatted, re-rendered, and in some cases subtly altered to fit the widescreen format. Scenes that were composed for 4:3 may have been slightly reframed. Colors may have been adjusted. Details that were in the margins of the original frame may have been cropped or added. For most viewers, this doesn't matter. The episodes look better in HD. But for completists and animation historians, the original broadcast versions of seasons 1 through 12 are essentially a different product than what's currently available. The South Park that aired on Comedy Central in 1997 doesn't quite exist anymore, at least not in its original visual form. It's been replaced by a cleaner, wider, higher resolution version that looks modern but subtly isn't the same show. This is something that has happened to a lot of classic television, the original broadcast versions being replaced by remastered editions. But in South Park's case, because the show's visual style is so distinctive and so tied to its crude, handmade origins, the re-rendering arguably changes the feeling of those early episodes in ways that are hard to articulate but impossible to ignore if you've seen both versions. Let's talk about something from the production side that reveals how close the show has come to not existing on multiple occasions. There have been several moments throughout South Park's run where the show came dangerously close to being pulled off the air, canceled, or abandoned. We've already covered the near quit after season 5 and the death threats following the Muhammad episodes. But there are other moments that are less well known. During season 24, the COVID-19 pandemic disrupted production so severely that the entire season consisted of only 2 episodes, both of which were long-form specials rather than standard 22-minute episodes. The traditional production process, which relies on 70 people working in close proximity for 120 hours a week, was essentially impossible under pandemic restrictions. For a brief period, it was genuinely unclear whether South Park could continue to exist in its current form. During the production of Season 17 in 2013, a power outage at the studio delayed the premiere episode. This might sound like a minor technical issue, but given that the show is produced in 6 days and submitted hours before air, a power outage during the final stages of production is a genuine crisis. The episode was delayed, which for South Park is the equivalent of a space shuttle missing its launch window. The entire schedule depends on hitting that Wednesday night deadline, and any disruption to the final 24 hours of production can cascade into missed broadcasts. And in Season 27, as we mentioned earlier, the 5th episode was delayed by an additional week because the production team simply couldn't finish it in time. Parker and Stone's public apology about doing everything at the last minute was treated as a humorous moment, but it also revealed a fundamental vulnerability in the show's production model. The 6-day cycle works brilliantly when it works. When it doesn't, there's no backup plan. There's no extra episode in the vault. There's no buffer. The show is produced on a knife's edge, and every season involves multiple instances where the team is racing the clock with no margin for error. The fact that they've been doing this for over 20 years without more frequent failures is remarkable. But the near misses, the delayed episodes, the pandemic disruption, and the creative exhaustion that almost ended the show after Season 5 all serve as reminders that South Park's continued existence is not guaranteed. It's the product of a production process that is inherently fragile, maintained by a team that has been working under extraordinary pressure for decades. Now let's close out with something that brings the entire iceberg together. South Park has been on the air for 28 seasons. It has produced 338 episodes. It premiered on August 13th, 1997, which means it has been running for over 28 years. In that time, it has won 5 Primetime Emmy Awards, been nominated for countless others, generated retail merchandise sales exceeding $250 million by the year 2000 alone, produced a theatrical film that grossed $83 million worldwide, and set a Guinness World Record for the most swearing in an animated film, entered the vocabulary of multiple languages, been banned in at least 2 countries outright, lost a beloved voice actress to suicide, had its own credits anonymized out of fear of retaliation, received death threats from extremist organizations, had 5 episodes permanently erased from streaming platforms, and signed a deal worth $1.5 billion to keep going. The show was created by 2 men who started by cutting shapes out of construction paper with scissors. Their first animation was a student film. Their second was a Christmas card. Their first viral success was spread through physically copied VHS tapes in an era before the internet. And now they preside over a franchise that has outlasted marriages, careers, presidencies, companies, entire entertainment formats, and the lifespan of most of the technology that existed when it premiered. And through all of that, the fundamental process hasn't changed. The show is still written in less than a week. It's still submitted hours before air. It's still drawn in a style that deliberately looks like it could have been made by children. And it still says the things that nobody else on television is willing to say. Whether that's admirable or reckless, whether it's art or chaos, whether it's the most important satirical voice of its generation, or just 2 guys from Colorado getting away with things they shouldn't be getting away with, is a question that 28 years of television have failed to answer. Maybe that's the point. Maybe the real bottom of the iceberg isn't any single episode, or scandal, or banned segment, or death, or deal. Maybe the real bottom is the simple, uncomfortable realization that we've spent almost 3 decades watching this show, and we still can't decide what it is, and neither can the people who make it. Trey Parker once said in an interview about the show's longevity that he and Stone don't have a grand plan. They don't know how the show ends. They don't have a final episode mapped out. They just keep making them one at a time, 6 days at a time, until they decide to stop. And every Wednesday night at 10, somewhere in Culver City, California, a satellite uplink sends their latest creation to Comedy Central with hours or sometimes minutes to spare. And the whole cycle starts again. 28 seasons, still going, still getting banned, still getting threatened, still making people laugh and cringe and think, and occasionally wonder if maybe this time they really have gone too far. So far, the answer has always been no. They haven't gone too far. Not as far as the world is concerned anyway, because the show keeps getting renewed, the audience keeps growing, and the deals keep getting bigger. And somewhere at the very bottom of this iceberg, past the banned episodes and the death threats and the lost voices and the construction paper origins, there's a question that nobody has been able to answer for 28 years. What would it take to actually stop South Park? Based on the evidence, the answer might be nothing, or at least nothing that hasn't already been tried. And on that note, we've reached the bottom. All 7 levels. Every dark corner, every hidden detail, every piece of real-world tragedy and behind-the-scenes chaos that makes this show what it is. If you're still here after all of that, I appreciate you sticking around. This show has given us some of the funniest, most provocative, most uncomfortable, and most surprisingly human moments in the history of animated television. And it's still going. If you want more deep dives into cartoon history, dark episodes, and the kind of behind-the-scenes stories that nobody else covers, you know what to do. We've got more coming, and trust me, the next iceberg goes just as deep as this one. Until then, sleep well if you can. Actually, wait. There are a few more entries we need to hit before we fully close out. I said 30 items across 7 levels, and I meant it. So let me take you through the last few things sitting at the very bottom of this iceberg that I haven't covered yet. The Imagination Land Trilogy, Season 11, Episodes 10 through 12. This 3-part event was significant enough that it was later recut as a standalone direct-to-video movie called Imagination Land the Movie, complete with additional footage not seen in the original broadcast. It won the Emmy for Outstanding Animated Program, beating out shows with significantly larger budgets and much longer production timelines. And the story it tells is genuinely one of the most ambitious things South Park has ever attempted. The premise is that Imagination Land, a realm where every fictional character ever created by humanity actually exists, comes under attack by a force of evil imaginary beings. Terrorists have breached the wall, separating the good imaginary characters from the evil ones, and the result is a full-scale war. Characters from every conceivable source are involved. Aslan from Narnia, Luke Skywalker, Santa Claus, Wonder Woman, and hundreds of others are fighting against characters like Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, the Xenomorph, and the Woodland Critters from that Christmas episode we discussed earlier. Yes, the satanic blood orgy animals are in this. They show up in Imagination Land as combatants, and they are depicted doing exactly the same things they did in their original episode, except now they're doing them to other imaginary characters in the middle of a war. In a scene that rivals anything from the Woodland Critter Christmas episode, the critters perform their rituals on enemy combatants, while the rest of Imagination Land burns around them. Meanwhile, in the real world, the United States government discovers the portal to Imagination Land and decides to nuke it rather than risk imaginary evil escaping into reality. Kyle is trapped inside Imagination Land when the nuke goes off, and the explosion is depicted with a level of visual ambition that far exceeds normal South Park episodes. The trilogy pushed the show's animation capabilities further than anything they'd done before or honestly since. But the truly disturbing element of the Imagination Land trilogy isn't the violence or the critter cameos. It's the B-plot. Cartman has made a bet with Kyle that if leprechauns are real, Kyle has to perform and act on Cartman. When leprechauns turn out to actually exist in Imagination Land, Cartman spends the entire trilogy trying to enforce this bet through the legal system. He takes it to court. He argues before a judge. The case goes all the way to the Supreme Court. The juxtaposition of a literal war for the soul of human imagination with Cartman's obsessive, single-minded pursuit of sexual humiliation through the legal system is the trilogy's central comedic engine. And it works because both storylines are played with absolute commitment. The war is genuinely epic. Cartman's legal battle is genuinely procedural. Neither side blinks. And the result is one of the most tonally complex things South Park has ever produced, oscillating between genuine excitement and deep discomfort in a way that only this show can pull off. The trilogy won an Emmy, a 3-part story about imaginary characters dying in a nuclear explosion while a 9-year-old sues his friend for oral gratification in federal court, won an Emmy award. And nobody seemed to think that was strange. Now let's discuss something from the show's very early days that most modern fans don't even know happened. The pilot version of Cartman Gets an Anal Probe was slightly different from what eventually aired. The very first episode of South Park was produced as a standalone pilot before the series was picked up. When Comedy Central ordered the show to series, certain elements were changed between the pilot and the broadcast version. Most notably, the original voices for some female characters were performed by Carrie Turner, not Mary Kay Bergman. When Bergman was cast, she redubbed Turner's lines for the broadcast version. This means that there are 2 versions of the first episode of South Park, one with Turner's voices and one with Bergman's, and the Turner version has essentially been erased from public availability. Additionally, the original unaired pilot featured a significantly slower tempo for the theme song performed by Primus. When the show went to series, the theme was sped up considerably. If you could somehow track down the original pilot with the slower theme and Turner's voices, you'd be watching a fundamentally different show than what the world saw in August 1997. Same plot, same animation, but a different cast and different music, which means a different feeling, a different energy, and ultimately a different legacy if things had gone differently. Let's also cover an element of South Park mythology that sits in the deepest part of the iceberg because it involves something the show did that was so specific, so targeted, and so petty that it has to be addressed. The Phil Collins grudge. When Blame Canada from the South Park movie was nominated for an Oscar, it seemed like a lock to win. The song was a sensation. Robin Williams was set to perform it at the ceremony. The cultural moment was there. But the song lost to You'll Be in My Heart by Phil Collins from the Disney film Tarzan. Parker and Stone were furious, and they held that grudge for years. Phil Collins became a recurring target in the show, depicted in various unflattering ways across multiple episodes. In one episode, Collins is shown winning a meaningless award and celebrating with grotesque enthusiasm, a direct reference to his Oscar victory. In another, he's depicted as an annoying, desperate figure who won't stop reminding people of his accomplishments. Now, losing an Oscar is disappointing for anyone. But the depth and duration of Parker and Stone's response to the loss reveals something about their approach to perceived slights. They don't let things go. They put them in the show. And because the show runs on a 6-day production cycle and can respond to events in near real time, any grudge, any slight, any perceived injustice can be transformed into content and broadcast to millions of viewers within a week. Phil Collins' Oscar win happened in 2000. Parker and Stone were still referencing it years later. That's the kind of long memory pettiness that most people keep in a private journal. Parker and Stone put it on national television. And here's one more for the absolute bottom of the iceberg. A detail about the show's theme song that almost nobody knows. The theme song has changed at least 7 times. The South Park theme was composed and originally performed by Les Claypool of Primus. It's one of the most recognizable theme songs in television history. But most people don't realize it's been through multiple complete redesigns over the show's run. The original version, used from season 1 through mid-season 4, featured a classic call-and-response vocal style. When the boys moved to 4th grade, the theme was remixed with a techno breakbeat style. In seasons 6 through 10, it was redone as a country-tinged bluegrass version. During season 6, when Kenny was dead, his lyrics were replaced by Timmy Birch singing about himself. From season 10 onward, the theme incorporated Claypool's custom instrument called a whamala, giving it a heavier rock and metal feel. In season 17, the opening animation was completely redone in 3D computer animation while keeping the whamala instrumental. And in season 25, the theme was re-recorded with a full orchestral arrangement reincorporating the uncensored Kenny lyrics. That's 7 distinct versions of one theme song across 28 seasons. Each version reflects the era of the show it represents. From the raw, handmade feel of the early seasons to the polished, self-aware production of the modern ones. The theme has changed as the show has changed, quietly evolving in the background while the episodes themselves grabbed all the attention. And within each version, Kenny is singing something terrible that you can't quite hear. That detail has been consistent across every single iteration of the theme. No matter how the music changes, Kenny's muffled obscenity remains. It is perhaps the most enduring element of the entire series, outlasting cast changes, animation style shifts, serialization experiments, streaming deals, and government bans. Everything else about South Park has evolved. Kenny's hidden vulgarity in the opening credits has not. That feels like a fitting final detail for the bottom of this iceberg, because it captures everything South Park is in one small, hidden, persistent act of rebellion. Something crude, something clever, something most people never notice, and something that has been there, unchanged, since the very first episode. 28 years of hiding something terrible in plain sight, and getting away with it every single time. All right, now we're actually done. All 7 levels, all 30 entries. From the surface level episodes that everyone knows about to the production secrets, real-world tragedies, government bans, and hidden details that sit at the very bottom of this iceberg. South Park has been on the air since 1997. It has outlasted entire eras of pop culture. It was there before YouTube, before social media, before streaming, before smartphones. It watched the internet be born and immediately started making fun of it. It watched the entire entertainment industry transform around it and simply kept doing the same thing it had always done. Except now with a $1.5 billion contract instead of a VHS tape being passed between friends. Trey Parker and Matt Stone are still making each episode in 6 days. They're still submitting them hours before air. They're still cutting construction paper shapes, or at least the digital equivalent of cutting construction paper shapes, in a studio in Culver City, California. And somewhere in the opening credits of tomorrow's episode, Kenny McCormick will sing something unspeakable through his orange hood, and almost nobody will hear it, but it'll be there. It's always been there. If you enjoyed this deep dive and you want more content like it, make sure to check out our other videos where we explore more dark, cartoon history and behind-the-scenes stories. We've got a lot more icebergs to explore, and they go just as deep as this one. Thanks for watching, or listening, or falling asleep to this, which honestly is the highest compliment you can pay a sleep video. Either way, I appreciate you being here for the full journey down. Until next time. And actually, I want to take one more moment before we truly close this out, because there are 2 more details sitting at the very bottom of this iceberg that I think tie everything together in a way nothing else can. The first involves something that happened during the production of the South Park movie, bigger, longer, and uncut, that most fans have never heard about. When Parker and Stone submitted the film to the Motion Picture Association of America for a rating, they received an NC-17. For an animated comedy, the MPAA told them the film was too graphic, too vulgar, and too offensive to receive anything less than the most restrictive rating available. Parker and Stone went back and made edits. They resubmitted, NC-17 again. They made more edits and resubmitted, NC-17 again. This happened 6 times, 6 separate submissions to the MPAA, 6 separate NC-17 ratings. Each time the board told them what needed to change, and each time Parker and Stone made changes, while simultaneously making other parts of the film worse. They would tone down one scene and then make an entirely different scene more graphic. The MPAA was playing whack-a-mole with a movie that kept growing new offensive heads every time one was cut off. During this process, Parker and Stone discovered something fascinating about the MPAA's priorities. The board was far more concerned about language than violence. A character saying a certain word would trigger an automatic NC-17, but a character being violently dismembered might only earn an R. This observation directly influenced the film's final form and became a central theme of the movie itself, which is explicitly about censorship and the absurdity of what society considers acceptable versus unacceptable in entertainment. The film eventually received an R rating on its 7th submission. It went on to gross $83 million worldwide and enter the 2001 Guinness Book of World Records for the most swearing in an animated film. The Oscar-nominated song Blame Canada was performed at the ceremony by Robin Williams in tribute to Mary Kay Bergman, who had voiced several characters in the film before her death. But here's the detail that sits at the absolute bottom. The title itself, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, is a deliberate innuendo that the MPAA apparently did not catch. Parker and Stone have confirmed in interviews that the title is an intentional double entendre that passed through the rating board without comment. The people responsible for deciding whether the content of the film was appropriate for American audiences did not notice that the title itself was a joke at their expense. It's been on posters, DVD cases, and streaming platforms for over 2 decades, and the MPAA never flagged it. That's South Park in a single anecdote, getting the joke past the people who are specifically paid to catch the joke. The second and final detail I want to leave you with is about the construction paper. The very first South Park animation, Jesus Versus Frosty from 1992, was made with actual construction paper, real scissors, real stop-motion photography. Trey Parker and Matt Stone sat on a floor, cut out shapes, moved them frame by frame, and photographed each position to create the illusion of movement. It took them months to produce a short that runs just under 4 minutes. By the time the show was picked up by Comedy Central, they had already transitioned to digital animation that mimicked the construction paper look. The pilot episode used a combination of real paper cutouts and early computer animation to achieve the distinctive visual style. By season 5, the entire pipeline had moved to Autodesk Maya, the same professional 3D animation software used by major studios, and that's what they still use today. But here's what I want you to sit with. The show is designed to look like construction paper. It always has been. The crude, flat, deliberately primitive aesthetic is a choice, not a limitation. They have the technology to make it look like anything they want. They could make it look like Pixar if they wanted to. They could make it look photorealistic. They have the budget, the software, and the talent. They choose to make it look like it was cut out with scissors by a child. And that choice, that deliberate refusal to grow up visually, is maybe the most South Park thing about South Park. A show that has been running for 28 years, that has generated billions of dollars in revenue, that has won Emmy Awards and been nominated for Oscars, that has been censored by networks, banned by governments, and threatened by extremists, still looks like a craft project from a kindergarten classroom. The sophistication is entirely in the writing. The animation says, this is nothing. This is paper dolls. Don't take this seriously. And then the writing says something so sharp, so provocative, and so precise that it changes the national conversation. That tension between what South Park looks like and what South Park actually is has been the show's secret weapon for almost 3 decades. People underestimate it because it looks simple. Networks give it more leeway because the animation seems harmless. Audiences let their guard down because how threatening can construction paper be? And then it feeds you your parents in a bowl of chili. That's the bottom of the iceberg. Not any single episode, not any single controversy, not any single death or ban or deal or threat. The bottom of the iceberg is the gap between what South Park appears to be and what South Park actually is. It's the oldest trick in comedy. Look harmless, sound stupid, then say the thing nobody else will say. 28 seasons, 338 episodes, $1.5 billion. Multiple government bans, real death threats, real human tragedy. And it still looks like it was made with scissors and glue. That's South Park. That's always been South Park. And based on everything we've covered today, that's probably always going to be South Park for as long as they keep making it. 6 days at a time, submitted hours before air, with Kenny singing something terrible in the opening credits that almost nobody will ever hear. Good night, everybody, sweet dreams, and try not to think about the chili. One last thing. If you made it this far, whether you are actively watching or drifting off somewhere around level 4, I want to leave you with the single detail from this entire iceberg that has stuck with me the most since I started researching it. Mary Kay Bergman's grave has 3 South Park characters engraved on it: Leon Cartman, Sheila Broflovsky, Wendy Testaberger. 3 fictional women from a cartoon that she helped build, permanently etched into the stone that marks where she rests. Her family chose those characters. They chose to honor her with the work she did for a show about foul-mouthed children in Colorado because that work mattered to her. It was the work she was proudest of. It was the work that let her step out of the sweet and cute roles that Disney had typecast her into and do something wild, something crude, something that let her play dozens of characters in a single recording session and bring each one to life with a personality that the creators themselves hadn't imagined until she walked into the room. She gave South Park its women, every mother, every teacher, every mayor, every girlfriend, every background voice in those first 3 seasons came from her. And when she left, it took a team to do what she had done alone. Her grave is at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in the Hollywood Hills. If you ever find yourself there, look for the 3 animated women on the headstone. They're the ones from the show about 4 kids in Colorado, the show that started with construction paper and VHS tapes, the show that grew into something nobody expected, the show that is still going 28 years later, still making episodes in 6 days, still getting banned by governments, still hiding aliens in the background, and still carrying somewhere in its DNA the voices of everyone who helped build it, including the ones who aren't here anymore. That's the real bottom of the iceberg. Not the controversies or the bans or the billion-dollar deals. The people. The ones who made the show what it is, the ones who are still here, and the ones who aren't. Okay, now I'm really done. Thanks for listening, and if you're falling asleep right now, that's perfect. That's exactly what this was for. Good night. Actually, one truly final thought. Because I keep thinking about this, and I think it deserves to be said out loud. The show that Parker and Stone almost quit making after season 5 has now been running for 23 additional seasons since that moment of exhaustion. 23 seasons of borrowed time. The Muhammad death threats happened on borrowed time. The China ban happened on borrowed time. The Britney Spears prophecy happened on borrowed time. Isaac Hayes' departure, the COVID specials, the Trump and Satan romance, the $1.5 billion deal, all of it happened after the point where the creators nearly walked away. And every single one of those moments, the funny ones and the tragic ones, the ones that got them banned and the ones that won them Emmys, could only happen because 2 guys who were exhausted in 2001 decided to keep going anyway. Not because they had a grand plan, not because they knew what was coming, but because they just weren't done yet. They still aren't done. After 28 seasons, 338 episodes, and a contract that keeps them going through at least 2030, they still aren't done. And based on everything we've covered in this iceberg, from the tip all the way down to the very bottom, the world is better for it. Weirder, more uncomfortable, occasionally outraged, but better. That's the iceberg, all 7 levels. Top to bottom, now you know what sits underneath one of the most familiar shows in television history. And the next time you hear that theme song with Kenny singing something terrible through his hood, you'll know there's an entire ocean of darkness underneath the surface. Thanks for being here. Whether you stayed awake through the whole thing or drifted off somewhere around the woodland critter blood orgy, I appreciate you. This has been the most disturbing South Park Iceberg, and I'll see you in the next one. Sleep well, everybody.